because I think leadership is an honorable profession, but it's also a big responsibility. I don't take lightly the fact that, God's most important asset, human beings, right? He's given me influence over different ones throughout the years. And so I have a responsibility to make sure that I help them and not hurt them. And I can do either, right? Every leader can, but we've got to be mindful. We have to know what we're all about when we're leading. What's our talent? What's our gifting? What's our skill set? What's our leadership style?
Stephanie, thank you so much for taking the time to coming with us on the Future of Work podcast. How are you today?
I am fantastic. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I can't complain. I can't complain. I'm really excited, and thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us. I'm really excited to dive into this topic, especially now when diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's being ripped up. There's a lot of things happening in the world of work right now, and we're here to talk about ally leadership, your book, right? How to lead
Yes.
people who are not like you.
Mhm.
This topic, I believe, like I said, is very important right now. And I think the first question I have for you is, what is ally leadership? What does that mean? And why is it so important these days?
I love it. So thank you for the question. And again, thank you for having me here. So let's first start with ally leadership. I could have named the book Allyship, right? How to lead people
Yeah.
who are not like you. But I purposely didn't because I didn't want to put the book in a DEI box, right? So
Hmm.
ally leadership, ally is an acronym, Daniel, and it stands for ask, listen, learn, you take action, because no matter
Ah,
what type of leader you are, no matter what age, race, gender, ethnic group, whatever, if you're a leader, you need to know how to be an ally, and to do that you've got to know how to ask, listen, learn, and then you take action. So
I
that's
love it.
really the yeah, that's the important part of the book, is because that then now makes it more of a leadership book versus a DEI, put it in the box kind of book. If you're a leader today, you need to know how to lead today's modern workforce. And then just to kind of add a little bit more to depth to that as well, Daniel, today's modern workforce consists of several different factors. So, first factor is that we've got six generations working, which is unheard of. Like, that's the first time in history
Yeah.
we've had so many different generations working. So people
Yes.
are, ages 16 to 75 that are in the workforce. And really, what that means for those of us as leaders is we're leading a whole lot of people that have different perspectives, different expectations. I mean, you and I both know we're probably two different generations. A Gen Z thinks very
Hmm.
differently than, let's say, a boomer, right? So
Yeah.
every leader is dealing with the intergenerational situation. So that's for, stage one. Stage two, women are the majority of the population. And so, why that's different is that changes the dynamics in the workforce as well, because women see things differently, we communicate differently, we think differently. So, that's going to change the dynamics in the workplace. Then, also, when you look at the ethnic demographics, right? So, every ethnic group is growing, non ethnic group shrinking. It has been shrinking for the past decade. And so,
Yeah.
that changes the dynamics in the workplace as well. Then when you add in, neurodiversity, or people with different able-bodied folks, or LGBTQ plus. So we as leaders have a plethora of people who are not like each other, and they're
Yeah.
not like us, right? So as today's leader, what they have to get a handle on is, how do you lead people who are not like you? Because either you're going to lead people who are not like you, or you're already leading people who are not like you. And so the book is really designed to give leaders a tool of, here's how I did it and got to the highest level, in hopes that these tools can be helpful for you as well, for you on your journey to make it a little bit easier. And of course, for you to get to your highest level,
Yeah.
and importantly, get big, big results.
Amazing. And I mean, I'm assuming that that's why you wrote the book. I mean, is it from personal experience? Is it like, why did you write the book, and what is it that you expect readers to really take from the book, would you
Yeah.
say?
Yeah, thank you. So what I really want them to take from the book is that, don't overcomplicate this. That's the first thing, right?
Amazing.
Let's keep it
Yes.
simple,
Yes.
And then because I think what happens is people get so nervous when
Yeah.
they're around people who are not like them, that they are afraid of making a mistake, or they're afraid of being, criticized, or canceled, right? Any of that
Yeah.
stuff. And so what happens is they stop trying, and
Yeah.
they
We
don't
live
make
in a
it,
world where we're,
you
we're
know?
tiptoeing around people, and it's
Tiptoeing around
crazy.
people. It's
I
so
hate it.
ridiculous.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yes.
as leaders, We don't have that option. Our job is to like do bold things, think differently so we can get different results. We're the leader, right? So my real purpose of writing the book was really to let leaders, to give them an easy way to do this and to not overcomplicate it, and to give them grace, and to encourage everybody else to give each
Yeah.
other grace, right? Because this
Yeah.
is foreign for all of us and we're all going to make mistakes. So don't just get out there and slaughter people because they may have had a misstep. Step back, give them some grace. And if we all do that, then this is going to be much simpler. The truth of the matter is, when you think about leading people who are not like you, and if you go with the acronym of ask, listen, learn, you take action, this is the same stuff that 5-year-olds do in kindergarten. It is not that complicated, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that was one of the real main things I wanted to do, is to really just demystify the whole thing. The other part in regards to your first question, yeah, the book is based on my experiences. So there are times that I knocked it out the park, Daniel, and then there are times that I absolutely missed the mark, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm incredibly vulnerable in this book, letting people know the times I did great, and then letting them know the times I didn't do great. So the book itself is packed with a lot of stories. And I thought that was going to be important because, we don't need more theoretical books out there, right? And I'm not
Yeah.
saying they're not good, but at the end of the day, we want to, everybody's got so much on their plate that I think most of us are going, just tell me how to do it, right? I don't have time to, figure all this out. Give me the 3 steps I need to know, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was really the mission behind the book. But a little bit about my story is I come from a male, well, let me be really specific, a white male dominated industry. And
Okay.
so, I start the book with how I was asked to take over this team, and the team didn't look anything like me, right? It was all white men. They all had a military background. They all were like former fighter pilots, and like just like everything you could think of that could be completely opposite of me. That was
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
team, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when I looked at the team as I'm standing in front of them for the first time, I'm thinking, oh boy, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
they're looking at me like, where'd she come from?
It's starting to sound like an intro of a movie. A lot of
Yeah.
movies I've seen. Like what?
How did we get here, right?
But this just goes to show that this happens every
It
day in
happens
every
every
company.
day.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
all the time. And so for me, Daniel, I felt like we needed to go deeper and wider, because every book that I saw out there up until this point was a book written to basically white men saying, "Here's how you lead women and people of color." And I was like, "Okay, that's good." And granted, for the most part, white men still control, at least in the US, 80% of the leadership positions, especially in Fortune 500 companies. So,
Yeah.
though I understood the thought process as to why the book would be targeted towards, that specific demographic, but I felt like we needed to go deeper and wider. This isn't just, white men, you need to figure out how to get it. That's not true. We all have to figure out how to
Yeah.
get it, right? If you're
Yes.
leading, because of all the reasons I said, you're going to be leading people who are not like you either. And so I just wanted to have a book that went deeper and wider for the conversation, and to also, give all of us as leaders an opportunity to not just kind of look to one group and go, you need to get it. No, no, no. We need to look in the mirror and go, well, actually, I need to get it, right? Like, how
Yeah.
do I do this?
Yeah.
And so that's what the book is really all about.
And that's amazing. And something I really liked about the book is that within the title, one can say that this is a book for leaders, but I'd say otherwise. I think it's also a book, a manual, an instruction for people aspiring to be leaders,
Yes.
right? Because in order to become a leader, you need to have these tactics and these ways of treating people and engaging with people that will get you to a leadership position. And that's
Yes.
something I really enjoyed about the book. It's not just from the top down, it's also from the bottom up.
Thank
um
you. Thank you for saying
yes.
that. That blesses me. And and I think you're 100% right, because listen, the advantage that leaders, let's say from your generation, I'm assuming you're a millennial, but you tell me if
Yes, I
I'm
am.
wrong.
I am.
Very well, Daniel. Okay. So right now the largest workforce are millennials, and I'm Gen X, so I'm just one group ahead of you, but
Okay.
millennials and Zoomers, and of course now the alphas have come into the workplace as
They're
well. And so
coming.
yeah,
The
they're
alphas
coming,
are
they're
coming.
here,
Yep,
exactly.
they're
So
coming.
that's the majority of the workforce is really younger, younger
Yeah.
folks. And so they may or may not, to your point, they may or may not be in the leadership positions right now. But the advantage that you all have is that you're not as hung up on this stuff as the older generations were,
Yeah.
right? We have a lot of
Yes.
baggage,
Yes.
a lot of history, and a lot of feelings in regards to, you know, when it comes to having conversations of diversity and equity and so on and so forth.
Yes.
Lots of trigger points, right? Whereas the younger generation doesn't have that, thank God, you know, so that's one less thing
Yeah.
you have to deal with. But what it does do is 100% right is that I want the groups that are maybe getting into their leadership position let you have that unfair advantage because you don't already have that baggage, right? Then you can really just come in going, okay, how am I going to be successful as a leader? The truth of the matter is how you get to the C suite, because that's where I tend to focus is people who want to get to the C suite or to a board. How you get there is A, producing amazing results, right? Because results still
Hmm.
matter. But
Yep.
B, also being visible. So knowing how to communicate and work up, down, sideways, right?
Yep.
And you know, three, and not it's not that it's the last, but it's you really have to understand how to effectively communicate with everybody, not just people who are like you. If you can get those
Yes.
three things done, you're golden. You'll go wherever you want to go. You'll be unstoppable in your career. And so the way that I see this book for younger folks who maybe to your point aren't in leadership right now but want to get there, master how do you effectively create teams that are going to be high performing teams. And the stats are clear, Daniel. The highest performing teams are teams that don't think alike, they don't look alike, they don't have the same background, they don't have the same work experience, they don't have the same schooling. They are as different as possible. That's when you get the best performance because you've got different
Yes.
ideas coming to the table,
Totally.
right? So the numbers
Yes.
are clear. We don't have to have a discussion anymore about whether diverse teams perform or not. They simply outperform traditional teams by 25%. I could rattle off stats from Deloitte, Harvard, McKinsey. I could go on and on with the statistics. So that we don't need to discuss anymore. What we do have to discuss is having diverse teams is great from a results perspective, but you have to be a leader that knows how to lead in order to be able to get all of these people who are so different from each other to be able to perform as one high performing team. That's where I'm
Yeah.
focused is getting the leaders
Yes.
to be able to level up their leadership.
And that's, yeah, that's amazing, and that's why I'm truly an advocate of remote work or flexible work. People are calling it a lot of things these days
Yeah.
because within this work structure you can actually get people from other backgrounds. Like
Yes.
in the past, it would be a company in Ohio, in Cincinnati, let's say. They would only hire in a 10-kilometer radius, a 10-mile
Yes.
radius, right? And then
Mhm.
everyone's thinking the same, right? And
Yes.
now with remote work, companies are able to attract talent from other countries, from other
Mhm.
perspectives. And
Yes.
I think that's something that in today's leadership style is also tricky, communicating via technology, right?
Yes.
It's sometimes easier to communicate face to face in an office setting,
Mhm.
but nowadays that's also another tricky part, right? Communicating through technology. Um,
Yeah.
and something you mentioned right now is communication. I've had experiences in the past as a leader
Mhm.
where I think that's what I've struggled with the most,
Sure.
communication. And by that
Mhm.
I mean the lack of
Yeah.
communication. When people don't communicate from the top down, from the bottom up, they tend to get in their heads and they start talking to themselves, and it's just, I think communication is key. And I think this is a good segue into my next question. What do you think is the biggest mistake leaders are making when trying to foster this inclusivity, this work scenario? What is that
Mhm.
one thing you see leaders struggling with the most?
Well, so I love the question, and I'll answer that in just a second. But I also want to go back to something that you said because I loved how you positioned it, which was the remote work. Right. A lot of times I am asked to quote different magazines. Will call my PR people. It's like, hey, what steps stance on this, right? And hybrid work and remote work is such a heavy subject right now, and everybody's trying to figure it out.
Yes.
And I just love how you positioned it, which is true. Now, all of a sudden, if people can work from all over, then you have even more opportunity to grab different perspectives, different types of employees. The second side of that, and here's kind of where I'm coming from. Even before I started running companies or got in the C suite or did board work, I was coming up usually as a VP of sales, right? And so one of the things that I am saying as loud as I can without making everybody mad is I am a big fan of remote work and hybrid work. And here's why. As a head of sales, most VPs of sales have always led remote teams.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
your salespeople are not in the office; they're actually in the field, and so they're in different countries, different states. I mean, that's just how the job is, right?
Hmm.
So heads of sales have, from the beginning of time, always led remote teams. And
Yeah.
think about the sales team. They're the drivers of the top line sales. Without the sales team, you don't exist as a business, right? And so
Definitely. Yeah.
you've got the people who are driving the revenue, who are remote. You're not seeing them every day. Usually they've got corporate cards, they're taking people out, they've got expenses, they're doing whatever they need to do to drive the revenue back into the business. And
Yeah.
so all of that to say that nobody ever, you've never heard a head of sales complaining that, oh my God, my people are remote and I need to get them back in here because of company culture. We just have never had that. We're not moaning and groaning about that, right? Because we've always led remote teams. And that means the reason why I say all this is I'm challenging leaders to don't believe the hype. Don't believe that because the team's not sitting in front of you, they're not productive. We've got all these different generations working. They have a different work style. What do you care? What you care about is, can they produce the result? If it
Yeah.
takes you 10 hours, 2 hours, why do you care? You give them a mission, a job, a result that needs to be done. And if they're doing it, great, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so that's where I want leaders to, like, again, and it's usually the older leaders that are having this problem. You've got to realize that times have changed. And what
Yeah.
you have to do is to figure out, how do I get the best people who can get the best result and get it into the point where none of us are burning out. That's the job, right? So how do I do that? So communication is one way, which now I'm going to go back to your second question. How do you communicate? We communicate through, yes, technology. Right now there's a big discussion about AI. AI is fantastic. Like AI
I
can,
love it.
it's so amazing. I'm
I
still
don't get
learning
I
it.
don't get why people are scared of it. I mean, I think
Yes.
people are so afraid of AI taking
Change.
their jobs, and it's
Yeah.
change, yes.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
the only inevitable things in life, I believe, are death and
Yes.
change. You
And change.
cannot go against
Can't
those.
run
If
against it.
you try to,
That's right.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, people are so afraid of AI taking their jobs, and
Mhm.
AI is not going to take your job.
No.
Someone who knows and understands AI is, and that's
There
just
you
a
go.
fact. That's
Yeah.
just a fact. It's going to be another human that
That's right.
leverages AI to
That's
take your
right.
job.
Yeah,
Period.
and when you think about AI, right, it's so good for efficiency. It's going to save us a ton of time. And so, but what it won't replace, at least not in the near future, is it's not going to replace that human interaction. We were
Correct.
created as human beings to interact with each other, right?
Yep.
And
Hmm.
so now kind of pulling this all together. So when we think of being a leader who knows how to ask, listen, learn, and take action, all of those things have to do with communication. And all of those things have to do with you as a leader realizing that, A, you don't know everything, B, your way is not the only way, it's just one way of doing it, right?
Yes.
And so
Yes.
now, as a true ally trying to lead a diverse team, because you know that they're going to simply outperform traditional teams, then what you have to do when it comes to communication is you've just got to realize that I have to be open and acceptable of people having different communication styles. So if you go into the conversation with how you see things, right, then you've kind of cut the communication down already before it even got started. But if you go into with the spirit and an attitude of, like, I don't know everything and I want to get to know, how you see things, how your perspective. If you go in, because I always say it's a heart and head issue, right? We've been
Yes.
addressing DEI from a head issue, and that's fine, but it's actually a head and heart issue, right? Because most people will know, like, I'll speak for myself. I'm a double minority, right? I'm a woman and a person of color. Well, I have a super spidey sense, right? That if you're coming to me, and I think every marginalized group does, right? No matter who you are, we all have that secret sauce where we're like, I can tell if you're coming in with a pure heart, or if you've got like an undertone there that's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
sense it
Yeah.
and feel it. And I think I'm no different than every other marginalized group out there. So here's why I say this is important. If we realize that you're coming truly with an attitude of, I don't know, but I want to get to know, we can sense your heart there. And we're okay if you maybe even make a little misstep of a mistake, because we know that your intentions were right, right? You may
Yes.
not have used the right verbiage, or maybe you didn't understand, what you said, and just kind of the cultural fluency and the undertone of it. All of that we can give you some grace on, because we realize that your heart is in the right place. Because what we find is most people would rather have a conversation. I'd rather have a conversation with you, and me realize that your intentions are pure, than to have you not want to talk to me because you're so afraid of making a mistake, right? So I'd rather
Yes.
you like make the mistake, because I can tell you didn't mean to make the mistake, than to not talk to me at all, right? And then
Yes.
you keep going on with the assumptions based on however you were raised, however you saw things, because we don't move the ball forward from there. That was a really long answer, but I hope
No.
you're picking up what I'm laying down, Daniel.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. And I think that's something that I will share with other leaders listening. It's okay to make mistakes. That's how
Yes.
we learn. And that's something I really like about your book as well. You share a lot of experiences, and we
Mhm.
can't grow if we don't experience the ups and the downs,
That's right.
right? I
Mhm.
believe at this point in my professional life, I currently have an amazing mentor, Frank Cottle, our CEO, who is day by day sort of, I don't want to say teaching me, but molding me into the leader I want to
Yes.
be.
I love that.
But before him,
Mhm.
I've had very crappy leaders when I was at the bottom. And
Mhm.
that's where I learned the most at this point. I don't want to be like him. I
Yes.
don't want to be like her, because at the bottom they made me feel like this.
Yes.
So I think it's all a tug of war, and we can't be afraid to make mistakes.
Mhm.
The important thing is to learn from them. I
Right.
believe that's
That's right.
it's just like you said at the beginning. Let's just keep it simple, you guys. It's this is not rocket science,
It's
right? I mean,
not.
it's not rocket
Yep,
science.
it's not. And
um
if you go into, with an attitude of, again, not knowing everything, right? And just asking the question. Let's just say, and by the way, kudos to your boss, Frank, I think you said his name was,
yes,
who's
Frank Cottle,
promoting you
yes.
and growing you. Yeah, because we're all going to learn something from bosses and leaders. Let me just speak directly to leaders. You are going to be a part of someone's story. Now you have the
Yes.
ability to dictate how they tell that story about your leadership. But every day as leaders, you are part of someone's story. So what will they be saying about you 5 years from now, 10 years from now, et cetera? So now Frank knows, right, that, he knows what Daniel's going to say because he just heard it. So Daniel was
Yeah.
like, hey, I had horrible leaders, right? And kudos to you for not naming them. But you're like, and then
They know who they are.
they always know who they are, right?
They will see me, yes.
But so
Nice.
that's a reminder for all of us as leaders, is everybody that we've ever led, somewhere along the line, it could be at the Thanksgiving table, or some event, and they're like, oh yeah, I used to work at such and such company, and I worked for so and so, and they were amazing, I learned so much, blah blah. Or they're going to say, I worked for so and so. I'm like, ugh, you know what I mean? Every day
Yeah.
we leaders are having the ability to determine how our personal brand is going to be marketed out there every single
Yeah.
day with our actions. But it does start with ask, listen, learn. And don't just ask, listen, and learn and do nothing with it. You have to take action, right? How do
Yeah.
you use your power and your privilege to make sure that you're able to help other people? Because I think leadership is an honorable profession, but it's also a big responsibility. I don't take lightly the fact that, God's most important asset, human beings, right? He's
Yeah. Yeah.
given me influence over different ones throughout the years. And so I have a responsibility to make sure that I help them and not hurt them. And I can
Yeah.
do either, right? Every leader can. But we've got to be mindful. We have to know what we're all about when we're leading. What's our talent? What's our gifting? What's our skill set? What's our leadership style? And then how do we use that to better the team?
Yeah. I love it. I love it. And in your book you have, and I really like this because it might sound silly, but you really emphasize leading people who are not like you. And I like that term. You didn't use who are different.
Yeah,
People who are not like you. And in a way, if we think about it, everyone else is not like us.
that's
We're all
right.
different,
Yep,
right? I
that's
mean, we
right.
might share some ethnical backgrounds,
Mhm.
skin color, whatever, but
Yeah.
everyone is different. And it because of that, there's this thing called unconscious bias, right?
Yes.
And I believe we all have that
For
in our
sure.
systems.
Yep.
How can a leader, or anyone for this matter, overcome unconscious bias and truly connect with people? Is it through ally leadership, or what would, even if from your own experiences, how can we overcome unconscious bias? What is it
Yeah,
to
yeah.
begin with in your words?
Yeah, absolutely. So unconscious bias, and you know, because you've read the book, I spend time on the science of how the brain functions because I wanted that to be super important for people to realize that some of it is not also just us. Like we just don't, I'll use the example. Let's use bias. The brain is not made up to just not like somebody. Like, it
Hmm.
doesn't work that way, right? So if you don't like someone, it's because there's something about that person that reminds you of something else, right? So it could be somebody else that you met
Even
that had that.
yourself
Even
reminds you.
yourself, exactly. So that's why, when if I take the science part of it, then all of a sudden it becomes less complicated and messy, right? So from a
Yes.
brain perspective, unconscious bias is actually a good thing. It actually helps protect us. Back in the day, it protected us a long time ago, right? Because
Mhm.
we had natural fears and there were fears that we should have had, right? And so if
Yeah.
you're thinking that for some reason, especially women, we will sense this a lot where we feel like this guy's like in my personal space, like, you have a natural, your body language will start to send off certain signals that you don't want to ignore necessarily, right? So biases, unconscious biases, are not necessarily a bad thing, right? So I
Okay.
want people to get released from that,
It's
right?
it's a survival
It's a
thing that we
survival
have.
mechanism,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, what we can do is you can't override that part of your brain, right? The brain is designed to protect us. That's the point of the brain,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
one of the points. It has other ones too. So it will naturally have certain instincts that, the fear factor of the brain, which is back in the back of your brain, the oldest part of our brain, it will actually come up and come alive during certain times because its job is to protect you. So you're not going to be able to change that. It's an instinct. However, what you can change is the information that you feed your brain, right? Because the
Okay.
the brain is just a predictive model. It's just literally talk about AI, right? it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
trying to just figure out when's the last time I saw this, heard this, and it's trying to make sense of it. So what
Yes.
you can do is if you can't change the instinct, just change the information you feed it. So if your
Love that.
instinct was, hey, this particular group of people or this particular person or this particular accent, like if you had these for whatever reason, you don't necessarily jive with that area, then how you override it is to feed yourself new information. That's because again, the brain's just taking it from the information it's received, right? So a simple way to do this, really simple way, is I did this just a couple weeks ago. One of the things, and you saw this in the book, because I'm all about how do we keep this simple, one of the easiest ways to get to know people who are not like you is to go. You're not gonna do it just reading a book and just sitting behind your desk, right? That's not how you're gonna do
Hmm.
it. You're gonna have to roll up your sleeves and get in the game, right? And so one simple way of doing that could just be go to a neighborhood that it's not everybody doesn't look like you, think like you, act like you, have the same background as you, right? Go into those neighborhoods, and within those neighborhoods, there's usually great restaurants. Go check them out, right? There's usually culture centers or museums or festivals, whatever. Immerse yourself into different arenas so that you can feed your brain different information so that you can get the brain to respond differently to different groups of people, right? So that's just like one of the most basic ways to do it. And I do this all the time because I want to practice what I preach. So 2 weeks ago, yeah, I know you've been here in Dallas before. I did something I'd never done before. There's like this Dallas Buddhist, I don't know what Buddhist area,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
on Sundays, you can go there, you can go into their temple, you can kind of see what that whole experience is like. Obviously, I'm not of that same faith, so it was really new and different for me. But and they open up the community, right? So that the people who are working there, you can go buy food from 9 to 3. You can go buy food it's made by actual Thai folks. So it's like your Thai grandma cooking for you, right? And the money that you spend on the food goes back to the monks who are now obviously trying to do nonprofit type of things. So
Yeah.
everybody wins in this scenario. I get to have great food. I get to go spend some time in an area, in a culture that's not like me. I get to learn. I get to talk. I get to mingle. I get to, it's something simple. I had the best time. And
Yeah.
there's every single one of us, unless you live in some weird remote area, you have that, access as well in that community. And so you just have to put yourself out there and put yourself in it. And so that's one easy way to start to override the biases that you have. How you do it is you literally feed your brain new information. That's how you do it.
I love that, and from personal experience as well, it's I think it's really important who we surround ourselves with, because
Yes.
we tend to allow other people's information to
Hmm.
dictate what our brain feels. And
Yes.
I'll go into a little something here, and I hope people don't get mad at me. I've had the privilege, and we'll talk about privilege in a
Yeah.
second, but
Hmm.
I've had the privilege. Um, I currently have the privilege to be working remotely. Currently, I believe it's a privilege. A lot of people
Hmm.
want it. Most people don't.
Yeah.
I've had the privilege of, I'm Mexican. I've lived in the US. I studied in the US. I speak the language. A lot of doors have opened for me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
And because I'm currently working remotely, I tend to move around a lot within my country, Mexico. It can be Monterrey, Puerto Vallarta, Mexico City. And I've had the honor of meeting a lot of people from abroad, especially Americans and Canadians, especially
Hmm.
those two groups of people. And I just love seeing how these people who are now my friends, they've shared this with me, is we had we had such an idea about Mexicans or Mexico in the US because that's
Hmm.
what we were fed.
Hmm.
And now that they live here and they've engaged with the culture, what you're saying, right?
Yep.
They don't want to leave.
That's right.
And I mean, they should stay. We welcome everyone here.
That's right.
But it's
Exactly.
that you really won't get to shift your mindset if you don't allow yourself to position yourself either physically or
Hmm.
however outside your comfort zone.
That's
And I
right.
think that I just love hearing those stories to this day from my friends who currently live here with me in Mexico, and they're not Mexican and they're from Canada or the US. Their minds just shifted in sharing other spaces with other people, and I think that's amazing.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that for them. I love that for all of us because travel. I come from aviation, so travel is a big part of obviously my world. And I think the biggest way, the easiest way to expand one's brain is travel.
Is travel.
It's a whole big
Yes.
old world out there. Get out from your small town. Small town creates small thinking, right? And so,
Yeah.
expand your thought process. And that, again, that's another easy way to feed your mind new information. Because, again, the brain is, I interviewed a neurologist recently. His name is Dr. Philip Dion. And he said something really profound that I absolutely loved. And what he was talking about is the brain, if you don't grab hold of it, it can take you into a dark spiral, right? Because the whole design is to like keep you safe. But, by
Yeah.
default, then you start fearing everything. And so, but one of the things he was sharing is that when the brain at the beginning, we have this fear, let's say of tigers chasing us because that was our survival mechanism. Well, now as the brain continues to evolve, which it does all the time, right? You're constantly rewiring your brain. Then now it's evolved into we're not fearing a tiger chasing us down the street because the odds of that are quite far, this is crazy. But what we do now perhaps fear is the unknown or a person that's not like me or rejection or fear of failure, right? So the brain has evolved to replace the fear, with something different. And so you're constantly having to pay attention. That's why this book is not just my stories, but I start with the research so that people realize
Yes.
like this is much bigger than you don't like somebody, right? It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
your
Yeah. Yeah.
brain is hardwired a certain way. And so you're gonna have to rewire this thing as well, but it's not as hard as you may think it is. It's actually quite simple, right?
Yes.
So yeah, so that's one way is just to realize that the fear evolves, and now the fear may be people because you've read a particular article and you're convinced that that's true, and all that stuff. So it's like you can override all this with simply asking, listening, learning, and then you taking action. It really is that simple.
I love that. I love that.
Mhm.
And we're going to get into privilege. And I think it's a very
Yes.
taboo topic right now. Privilege. Who has it? Who doesn't? Do they deserve it? Etc. We're not going to get very in depth into it, but I think something that we can just say as a fact is there are people with privilege, either in
Yes.
a professional setting,
Yeah.
in a socioeconomic setting, in whichever setting. There's people with privilege.
Yeah.
And I believe personally, the one way to make this less of a taboo topic is to realize that there is privilege and those who
Mhm.
hold it that they have it.
That's right.
That's
Yeah.
just my way of thinking.
Well, can I go
How
even
can
one step further,
yes, yes,
Daniel?
yes,
My
yes.
thing is to let everybody know everybody has privilege, right? Because
Ah.
it's such a positive word that we've made it a negative feeling,
Hmm.
because it's gotten grabbed by just, talking points, right, for the media.
Politics. Yeah.
Politics.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when you think of the word privilege, it's a positive word, right?
Yeah.
Like you have
Yeah.
a privilege, that's a good thing. But what I want everyone to know is everybody has privilege, literally
Okay.
everybody. So I'll use me as an example, right? My privilege is the fact that I don't have a disability. So I can, if I'm
I
going to
love
go
that.
have a meeting, I don't have to worry about is there a ramp? Is there an elevator? Do I have to take the stairs? Because I don't have a disability. I don't have to think about any of that. I'm just going to take the meeting in whatever building it's in, right? That's a privilege that I have. I'm a right handed person. So if I have a go rent a car and it's a stick shift, I don't have to, the car is designed for right handed people. If you're a
Yeah.
left-handed person, you got to figure that whole thing out, right? Because cars are designed for right-handed people. So there's basics. Like if everybody realizes that you no matter who you are, you have privilege. Now, if we start with that as the equal playing field, now we can look at privilege a different way, right?
I love
So
it.
far,
Wow.
yeah, it's again keeping
I
everything super simple.
I want to say thank you to you. You know how you sometimes meet someone and they just say something and then you're like, "Oh, this person just molded my life a little." You just did that. I had not thought about that, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I
Thank
will take that into my daily life.
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
it. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
But how can we make privilege not taboo? How can we turn it into a tool for empowerment and
Yes.
advocacy?
Yes. Well, is one, realize you have it, right? Don't get triggered by the word privilege. You've got privilege no matter who you are, no matter what your circumstances, you have privilege over somebody else. And in the book, I actually talk about it, and I know you know this, 5 different types of privileges, right? Because it's not, yes, it could be, money, it could be social economic status, it could be all kind of things, but it could also be something as simple as proximity privilege. And I tell a story about, when my husband got sick, I had proximity privilege that we could get the ball moving in the complex world of insurance, right? And so
Yes.
so there's all kind of ways to think about privilege. Now, to answer your question, how do we use it for good, right? Is once you realize you have it, then that alone should change you, right? That should make you realize that. And let's just bring it back to a leadership perspective. As
Mhm.
leaders, you have privilege, and you have more privilege than the people who work on your team. You
Mhm.
may be in meetings that they're not in. You may be given, opportunities to experience different experiences that they don't get to experience. So all of that is a privilege. Now, how do I use that privilege to actually help further the team? Right. So I can grow them, based on their gift, their talent, etc. So something is super simple. When I was working executive, especially in the C-suite, I was media trained, right? Because if in our industry, if something crazy happened, then you've got to get the executives out there on the speaking circuit and talk about, let's say the worst case scenario, a plane crash, right? Now all of a sudden you got to kind of manage this whole story, and so I'm media trained. Now that is a privilege that I know how to work and talk to the media. My team doesn't have, if something's going down, we're not going to stick my sales team out there to talk to the media. That's like the people who are not talking to the media is the sales team, right?
They will eat them alive.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Exactly. Ain't nobody talking to the media, right? Unless you're trained to talk to the media.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
But what I can do as a privilege that I have is to take the training that I've received and then take it back to the team, because salespeople spend 90% of their day communicating, right? Like their whole job is communication. And so if I can teach them things that I've been taught, that I've had the privilege to be, taught, how can I teach them, a different version of that can be applicable to their job? Well, that's how you use your privilege. So now all of a sudden I'm furthering their growth, their understanding, their talent, and that's now going to make them a better presenter, make them a better listener, make them a better salesperson, make them a better mom, dad, whatever, because
Yeah.
communication is communication. So that's a simple way of using your privilege for the betterment of the team, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Another way that leaders should be always thinking about is, well, if I have a privilege and I have been exposed, like I tell the story about when I first got into aviation. I always had a uniform. Like I grew up a child of a soldier. My dad was in the Air Force. So I
Okay.
saw uniforms all the time. And then I worked for the airline and I was given a uniform, right? Then all of a sudden I was promoted into sales and I could wear whatever I wanted. Well, I wore this pantsuit that I think I was looking good, right? And my boss was like, eh.
Yeah.
Right? Because I didn't know how to dress for it. Was a great pantsuit, but back in the day, women didn't wear pantsuits, right? Like
Yeah.
I didn't know
Yeah. Yeah.
that. And so I had to have somebody who had the privilege and understanding and a bigger scope to teach me this is not how ladies dress. This is 40 years ago. This is not how women dress when going to meet corporate clients, right? You don't do
Hmm.
pantsuits, you do, skirts, dresses, whatever, right? That's a simple way that you can
Yeah.
go, oh, okay, people may not know how to dress in this particular environment. I may take somebody to a country club and there's 16 pieces of silverware in front of them. They don't know how to maneuver with that. It's a privilege that I can teach, like, okay, here's how you work this thing. Think, bread, milk, water, right? BMW, right?
Yeah.
Teaching different things to different people. If you're the leaders, I guess the biggest message is a long answer. The biggest message is be proactive about what your privileges are so that when you see other people don't have them, you can spring into action. And
I
privilege
love that.
doesn't have to be this big, grandiose thing. Every day you have privilege that somebody else you're around doesn't have. How do you use that privilege for good?
I love it. I love it. And I honestly feel we're coming to the end of our episode, before we wrap up, I have one final question. First of all, I feel like I've had the privilege of speaking with you. So I just
Oh,
want to
you're
go
so
say and
sweet.
say that.
Thank you.
Um, one last question before we go, and I want to take us into a little time machine here, if you will. I want to leave you with one final big question.
Okay.
You've seen how leadership has evolved. We've talked about how allyship is shaping the workforce. And currently, I I love that you mentioned this. At this point in time, the workforce is comprised of as many generations as possible. Gen Alpha's coming in. That's going to be a
Yeah.
wow. I can't. I'm actually excited. People should be
Yeah,
excited about the future.
that's right.
Um, and technology right now, AI, it's just shaping everything we do. So let's fast forward maybe 10, 20 years from now. If you had to paint a vision of what the future of work should look like, what would it be? What's the world of work you hope we're building toward?
Yeah, that everybody feels like they belong at that company or in that department, right? Because we think of diversity, equity, and inclusion. A lot of times where people don't really take that next step is belonging. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your race, gender, sex, sexual orientation, all that stuff is. It doesn't really matter. It's really all about how do people feel at work? Do they feel safe enough that they can voice their opinion? They can provide feedback. They can even challenge and ask questions like, well, why are we doing this? I'm not really clear. That type of environment is what we leaders need to be creating. And so, where I see the future is where people feel like they can come to work. And we always hear this, bring your best selves to work. And really, what
Uh,
does that mean? Really, what that means is based on my talent and my gifting, you've hired me into this company for those reasons. And then now that I'm here, I can get behind because I completely understand because the leader's done a good job communicating. I know
mm-hmm,
what the
mm-hmm.
purpose of the business is. I understand that what my contribution is, how it helps the business. And I understand what business we are in as a business, right? And
Yeah.
therefore, I now have the liberty to be able to use my gifts and my talents to be able to contribute so that we can all, the business as a whole, can move forward and grow. And so it's not about what my race or gender is. It's about how much do I feel safe enough to be able to literally use my talents and my gifts in a way that's going to overall contribute to the results of the company. And so, what
I
I would
love it.
say is, long term, if we leaders, all of us, can step up in our sphere of influence, it could be a department, it could be one person you're leading, it could be a whole company, right? Or it could be countries. If we take that mentality, which is I just want to create an environment. And you, by the way, you have to be a really secure leader for this.
Yeah.
Okay. So this isn't for everybody. Mediocre leadership is dying off quickly, right?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
you've got to be secure enough in yourself to be able to say to people, listen, guys, what is it that I'm missing? Because I feel like this is from where I see there's this, but what haven't we discussed? What haven't we addressed? Like, where am I missing the mark? What's
Leaders got to be vulnerable.
got to be vulnerable, right? And you've got to
Yeah.
bring the whole team because the whole team has different gifts and talents, right? You got to bring the whole team in. How can we be better, guys? What is it that and they need to be safe enough to go, you know what? Actually, I think we're going to miss the mark on this one because of this, and not be shunned, but be like, thank you so much. That's a really good point. How do you feel over there, Daniel? What are your thoughts here? If you can get that kind of synergy going, and by the way, it can be done. You have
Yeah.
a team that is unstoppable, and you have a team that knows how to perform at the highest level. And that's leadership. And so that's what I really want to see. And I'm doing my part to help leaders if they're willing to listen and learn. This is how you do it. And you don't need to overcomplicate this. This is how you win. You know what the science, and I talk about this in the book, and then I'll shut up. The secret to
No, I love it. I love
Daniel,
it.
the secret to winning is winning, right?
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
secret to winning. People are always like, how do you win? How you win is you win, right?
yeah,
And the reason why that's important is because once you win, the brain actually again, it's an AI, it's a predictive model. It realizes and recognizes the chemicals that were created, how you're feeling with that win, the adrenaline that's flowing, and what the brain then does is goes, I want that feeling again. So it's
yeah,
literally called the winning effect. That's the science behind it. The secret to winning is winning. But the only way that you win is you have to figure out what makes people winnable. And then once you find that out, then you have to become an ally, ask, listen, learn, you take action to their win. You do that, leaders, and man, you're going to be like marketable, making a ton of money because
yeah.
everybody's going to want you on their team because you actually know how to lead.
And yes, I love it. And just adding to what you said, I hope there comes a time where we actually live in a world, in a future of work like that. And especially that leaders, CEOs who, I'm just going to go out and say it, tend to see things with dollar bills, realize
Mhm.
that if you make people feel this way, more money will come to
$100
you.
bills,
It's, I mean,
100%.
people who feel happy, encouraged, like
Yes,
they belong, they do their best. And if they do their
yes,
best, they're making more money for you. It's
that's right.
simple.
It's
It's
simple.
very simple. It's simple.
Don't
Stephanie, it's
overcomplicate it. Yep.
don't overcomplicate it. Stephanie, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. I hope that we can. There's just so much more that we can go into, and
Yes,
maybe we'll do a part two
I
of
love
this.
it, Daniel. Don't you
I would
threaten
love
me with
that.
good a good
Don't
time.
you threaten me with a good time. Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah. I love it.
right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Before we go, how can our listeners get in touch with you? Where is the best way they could acquire your book
Thank you.
before we take off?
Yeah, yeah. So book is sold anywhere books are sold. You can go to Amazon or what have you. The best way to connect with me, I'm on all the socials at my call sign is at the Stephanie Chung, or you can just go to stephaniechung.com and get all the information there. So that might be the
I love
easiest
it.
route.
Stephanie,
Thank you
thank you
so
so
much
much
for
for coming.
having me, Daniel. This was a
No,
really good time.
it was a pleasure as well. Thank you so much for being here. And I hope we get to do this soon enough again.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Have a good one.
You as
Ciao.
well.
If it's impacting the future of work, it's in the Future of Work podcast by allwork.space.